Not sure if I'm supposed to look at myself or look at you.
Look at your camera. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to my channel. My name is Sadhana, and welcome to the first in a series of creator stories. And today my guest is Rebecca LeFebvre, and she can say her name with the correct pronunciation later. And I'm so happy to have Rebecca here. I have been working with her decks for a little while, and most recently her latest one, Fantastic Being. And we're going to talk about decks and cards and what living nature inspiredly means and all kinds of wonderful things. So welcome to Rebecca. And thank you so much for being here today.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, your biography is so inspiring, and the list of things that you have done and the different careers are just, right up my alley. And I think it's one of the reasons that I feel so connected to your work, and know that your offering has been delivered with a tremendous amount of integrity. Yeah, and I'm just going to list off some of the things in her career experiences straight from Rebecca's website, which, by the way, is aveclavie.com. Rebecca has been a pediatric and end-of-life nurse, registered nurse, and with social work, she's worked with public policy and development. She's also a clinical nurse instructor, as well as an RN patient advocate and complex care manager. She is a graphic designer and creative director. On the decks, she has designed the decks as well as done the watercolor artwork and done the inspirational messages on the back. She's a workshop presenter and speaker, business developer, change management, which we'll have to hear what that is all about, a consultant, editor, writer, artist, and coach. So welcome to Rebecca. Rebecca is from Idaho, so she's just one time zone away from where I am on the West Coast. And so it was really easy for the two of us to connect. So thank you and welcome.
Yeah, actually, I'm in Colorado.
Oh, you're in Colorado. Okay. Mm-hmm. I thought you were in Idaho. So still Denver is you're just one time zone away, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And so over here on the West Coast, we are in a time of smoke and haze with the forest fires burning in the West Coast of the US. So from California through Oregon and Washington State and British Columbia is all smoky, and Colorado, kind of the same environment right now.
Yeah, today is one of the first days we've had clear skies.
Oh, you're clear. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's really scary. And because in British Columbia, usually in the summers, we have a lot of forest fires. And this is the first summer where we've been really blessed. And now at the end of the summer, here we are covered in smoke again. So as far as nature goes, it's really, I feel like the only safe place right now is to be in the forest and to be with the trees and with the oxygen of the trees, because out in the yard, out going for walks, it's not particularly safe. Yeah. And yesterday I saw people out cycling. Today there was a cycling team that went by, and I don't know how they're doing it because it's really, really not safe. Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how your work as an RN and a social worker segued into art and cards, or has it all been integrated through your whole life?
Oh, that's a good question. No, I'd say it wasn't until recently that an integration of my experiences felt less anxiety provoking, I guess is the word, or there's just been a lot of, and I don't think this is unique to me. I think this is unique to a lot of people. We have a lot of different skill sets as humans, and we wear a lot of different hats, but we tend to, because our world is the personal versus the professional, we sort of pigeonhole ourselves or create silos unnecessarily, saying and sharing only certain aspects of ourselves, depending on who it is that we're talking to or how we're trying to portray ourselves to that other person, especially when it comes to our professional lives. For me, when I was in high school, I was an avid artist. I loved art, but I didn't ever really necessarily feel like I'd become an artist and make money off of being an artist. So I chose going into psychology because I loved working with humans. Even when I was 16, 17, and 18, I had volunteered in different capacities and had done different things. And I thought, we're such a complex species. I was already interested in that at a very young age. So I went into psychology, but one piece of psychology that I found limiting, at least for me, was the lack of ability to, I felt, really help move people beyond the psyche and into action. And part of social work for me, I'm a systems focused person, so I really like looking at how we as an individual exist or coexist within our families, our communities, our schools, our religions, our society. So much of the work that I've done has either been at the micro level, working with individuals. When I first started out, I worked with homeless population. Most of the folks that I worked with were women with multiple children who had really significant issues related to their systems and how they were going to live within the construct of American life and how they would move themselves forwards if they chose to. So at that time, I moved into public policy work, which gave me more of a macro level experience and exposure to numerous issues within our world. And then to fast forward it, I had started a marketing and communication company. I'm just sort of a go-getter, and when an idea hits me or strikes me, I've always sort of had the internal gumption to just kind of go after it and make it happen. Because I've always felt like the people who were my inspiration were dealing with challenges far more significant than the ones that I was trying to tackle in my personal professional life. So I felt like if those women that I was working with could do what they were doing, why couldn't I possibly do it as well, and then also help lend a voice to them in a different forum. Let's see, I was a graphic designer and marketing consultant for a number of years, and then went back to school thinking I'd become a nurse midwife. But the American healthcare system is incredibly complex, and it also gave me exposure to even more societal issues and the way that our human psyche works. I also was able to work with very complex situations with babies who were born with congenital anomalies, from heart to physical to brain anomalies that led to end-of-life conversations before they even were 1 or 2 days old. And then I moved later on in my nursing career towards the end of life, working with people who are 80 and 90, who were really trying to wrap up issues that they may not have dealt with for decades, just because we are anxiety and fear driven. So that was a long answer, but to get to the root of it, I've seen over the past 25 years a lot of unnecessary angst, because I feel like, are so scared of really looking at who we are and then therefore expressing our authentic self. And these decks of cards came at a time, specifically the Fauna deck, when I was really grappling with whether or not I could stay within the healthcare profession and remain a nurse, or work within the construct of that system in a way that really was in alignment with my integrity as a caring professional. So when I created the deck, it was really a healing deck for me, a way for me to connect with nature, which was also a constant thread for most of my patients who were hospitalized for an extended length of time. If they were in the hospital for a month or two, which was very common for my really complex patients. I would say to them, so what are you going to do when you get out? How can I help make you or help you feel more like a human and less like a diagnosis that we have crafted around you? Plus, you've been connected to tubes and technology for 2 months. How are you going to reconnect with who you are as a human? And across gender, across religion, across age, you name it, socioeconomics, the number one thing people would say to me is, I'm going to go for a walk. It was somehow, again, connecting back to nature to find who they were as a human. We vacation to it all the time. When you ask people, where are you going to go to take a break from life? I'm going to go to the beach. I'm going to go to the mountains. I'm going to go skiing. It's outside. It's in nature. So for me, nature is one of those, it's just intrinsic in terms of how we heal ourselves. We are part of it. And so using animals, flowers, and fantastics is a great way to support metaphor and deep contemplation and thinking about consciousness and purposefulness in one's life. That's how I came to create the cards. But it wasn't a smooth, easy path for sure.
No, and it feels like this was a long journey for you. So you were in school studying psychology, and then did you complete a BA in psychology and then go into social work, or like was it all happening at the same time?
I started in psychology, and then I moved to my social work degree. So I transitioned out of that degree program and then moved into social work, and I graduated with my first undergraduate as a social worker. So I have a BASW, and then that was in 1996. And then in 2004 is when I went back to school, 2003, and got my nursing degree. So I got an additional undergraduate degree to become a registered nurse.
So have you always been in Colorado?
No, my first undergraduate degree was in Maine. Actually, both of them I received in Maine, University of Maine, and one at University of Southern Maine. And then we moved out to Colorado in 2006, I want to say, 2006. So we've been here 14 years.
So you grew up on the East Coast?
Oh, that's a good question.
No?
My father was in the military, so we moved quite a bit. I'd say that the East Coast was home more so, but between living here when I was younger and then again as an adult, I think I've probably lived in Colorado more years than I have anywhere else. But I love cold northern weather.
The top half of the U.S. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. So as a military child, did you live in any of the bases off the mainland USA?
When I was, I want to say about 7 or 8, we had planned to be stationed in Germany. We got all of our shots and we're headed out, and my brother broke his collarbone, which delayed. He was playing football, touch football. No, it's supposed to be flag football. So my mother was wondering, how did you break your collarbone playing flag football? But then we got stationed here instead, or my father got stationed here in Colorado. So I didn't end up making it overseas at any point, unfortunately.
And are both of your parents American? Did they both grow up in the US?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's nice to know also like the cultural, ethnic background too of artists and sort of where that inspiration comes from. Do you have any other ethnic associations in your family, like European associations? Or?
And my both parents on both sides, both of my parents, both of their grandparents, or their parents, sorry. So both of my sets of grandparents were from Canada and from the Quebec, Montreal area. So that's where I get my last name, LeFebvre. But otherwise, I'm not quite sure where we come from before that. I'm not
Say
sure.
your last name.
LeFebvre is the way that we
LeFebvre.
say it.
That's
As
the way
if
that
it
you
was,
say
yeah, LaFave.
it. Okay, LeFebvre.
LaFave.
I've been stumbling my way through it, even though I sort of kind of know how to speak French. So yeah. So that's your family name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And do you have a partner? Do you have children? What's going on in your present situation?
I do. I have a husband. We've been married 20, he's going to kill me. I don't remember. Over 20 years. We've been together since 96. So we've been together a long time. We have a 20-year-old who will be 21 in February next year. And then we also have an 18-year-old and we have an 11-year-old, all boys.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a dog, Spot. He's snuggled in over there. And then we have another dog. We also have a cat. She's over here. 5 chickens and 2 fish.
Wow. 5 chickens and 2 fish. Are they good egg layers?
They are still babies. Well, they're teenagers now, so we haven't had our first eggs from them yet. We'll see.
And so do you have 1 boy and 4 girls? Is that kind of how it works? Or are they
I've got all my boys, all my children, human children are boys. And then the 5
children?
Huh?
And your chicken children?
My chicken children. They're all girls.
They're all girls. Okay. Aloha, Jonathan. Thanks for joining us. Wow, that's amazing. So you're just like in it with people. And I also share your passion for the beginning and the end of life. And I birthed 3 of my 4 children at home. Or actually, that's not true. 2 of 4. The intention was for 3 of 4, but 2 of them happened at home, and presently, involved in end of life care as well too, as a hospice worker. And the whole connection with nature has always been it's a really important part of my life. And I've either lived at the ocean or in the mountains, so to speak. So that might be another reason why I really just I really feel the energy of your work. And I'm going to go to my list of questions because I have. So one of the things I wanted to ask you was so are you living in a urban area or a rural area, or how would you describe where you are right now?
I would say we're in the suburban area. So we're in between Denver and Boulder, kind of smack in the middle.
And you're allowed to have chickens?
Yes, we are.
That's nice. Okay. So what came first was the fauna?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Fauna came first. And when I look at your website and your pamphlet, it looks like the 3 decks were part of a big plan. Did it happen that way?
Originally, yeah, let me show you something. I'm going to just go over here. I didn't think I was going to show you these, but.
Hi, Flora. Thanks for being here.
Sorry to hop off. Okay, so I think the past, 10 years have been a bit of a blur. I've done a lot as a nurse, and did a lot of growing, mostly because I was so amazed by people's willingness to allow me to see a part of their really challenging journey in life, really at the end of life. But also, like, as a nurse, you pop into people's lives in crisis situations when they're not going to be, they don't know what's happening. For a lot of people, it's the first time that they've ever been really sick where they've needed to be hospitalized. So it's really an honor to work with people during those moments in their lives. So I had a lot of these like stories really intense emotional stories that I've seen people go through. And I knew they weren't embedded in me, but they definitely felt like I had these like tethers of emotion and complexity that were I don't know how to explain it, but sort of like clinging to me. And I needed to do something. So I was pretty depressed in a moment in my life, and I was taking a shower and thinking, probably crying. And something came to me. I was also doing intuitive training at the time as a way to kind of get in touch with all those things that were hanging on to me. And something said, you need to make some animals, or you need to connect with the animals. And I hadn't really ever listened to those kind of voices before, but I did. So here's a deck of cards that I had originally made.
Butterfly?
Yeah, there's 50 of them. These are the original, this is the original deck that I made. This deck was called the Animal Spirit deck. I sold about 500 of these cards. They're also similar in that I had done research. So I made 50 animals in about, a week. My husband would find me up at 2 o'clock in the morning creating this art and then writing these descriptions. And then in these, which is unique, is not sure which way to go. I have 3 meaningful words. So in the research that I did, I uncovered what was so unique about these particular animals amongst all the other animals that I was trying to research. I was really trying to find their authentic quality that would then allow me to write an inspirational message about what they were trying to impart. It's not like a kangaroo tries to be a butterfly. They're very clear about who they are and what their intention is and purpose is on this planet. So I sold these for a couple of years. I think the copyright on these, is 2016. But while I was selling them at markets and shows, I had a lot of people ask me if I was a shaman, if I was Native American, because I use the language animal spirits. And I'm neither of those things. I'm a nurse, I'm a social worker, I'm an observer, I'm a connector. I can intuit things and have always been able to do that, but that's not my training. And so I really felt like it wasn't the correct way to market what it was that I was trying to put out there. So after I finished selling these decks, I sat on it for about a year. Phoebe, who is the co-creator with me, who actually, she hand draws all of the art for me. I really wanted to do a collaborative art project with somebody. I could have done the drawings, but I really loved the idea of being able to co-create an artistic piece of work with somebody so that she would be it wouldn't just be my piece of work. It would be something that that I created with somebody else, similar to the fact that I can't really own all of this either. I feel like much of what was written is from source, and also the stories that these humans who I have had the ability to care for over the past 25 years have shared with me. It's not really just me coming up with it. It's really their voice speaking through me. So that the animal,
their voice comes through these messages on the back?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, no, it's okay. I can kind of ramble, so you can.
No, I didn't actually think about that, because what I was going to ask you was, were there book references, or what was your like, where did you begin to write these? Like, what kind of references and resources were your starting place? And I understand that a lot of this came through source and story and through all your experiences with people in their healing journeys, but there must have also been some, tangible references too.
All of the animals, the flowers, and the fantastics come from some sort of scientific source. Like, I've sourced them from different books, from different online sources. So they're coming from what's their behavior in the real world, the scientific, I can't think of the word, but how do they behave amongst, so for example, I'm staring at chickadee right now. How does a chickadee live with other chickadees, and how is it different from the other birds within its species, and what makes it so unique? So when I look at their behavior in the natural world, and I come up with these words, these tenacity, it's because I found something that was unique about the way chickadee interacted within their own subset, or with, say, like crows. They don't have a problem going after crows if crows are in their space. And I thought, wow, what an incredible metaphor to be able to say this like teeny little bird that one would never suspect as being really strong and tenacious actually is an incredibly tenacious little bird if only you pay attention to it. So all the words on the back of all the cards are really a matter of research and study of their behavior in the natural world, me identifying a particular concept that I feel like is representative of who they are. And then I write my inspirational message based off of that word, but the knowledge that has been shared to me by the babies, the teens, the middle-aged and older adults who have shared their life struggles with me while I've been a social worker and a nurse. And the message is that really if they could have said something to me and said, Rebecca, I would like you to take this last thing I have to say about the struggle I've had and share it with the rest of the world, this is what I think that they would have wanted me to share. So that's how I come up with my messages.
It seems really emotional for you. Like you feel very close to, this is very close to your heart, this work.
Yeah.
So were there, so in the fauna or the flora or the fantastics, were there a number of beings or flora or fauna that didn't make the cut?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I could show you the list.
So for example, with the fauna, about how many did you cut to get to choose 57, and how did you choose the number 57? Does 57 mean something to you?
I love that question. Yeah, look, actually, I'll show you. See, look, Panther used to be in the old deck. It didn't make the cut for the new deck. Ostrich used to be in the old deck. And I didn't say it didn't make the cut. It doesn't really mean it didn't make the cut. It just, when I was looking at the totality and I kind of came back and said, what do I want these decks to really mean? Like I created the animal spirit deck. Yeah, dragonfly. Dragonfly's in here.
So beautiful.
Because it was going to be a new iteration of the deck, and I knew that there was going to be 3 now. After I had sold those, I said, okay, how do I really want these decks to exist in this world, and how would I like people to use them? And because I was creating these with Phoebe, I would put together a list. We probably had about 100 when we started, including the ones that were in the old deck. And then she and I went through, like, does that one feel right? Does this feel right? Then we talked about the elements. Which ones do you feel like fit within a particular element, and why? And a lot of that actually was just pretty intuitive for Phoebe and I as to where they dropped in. And because there were certain aspects of them, they really felt like they were air or earth or fire. And I can talk more about the 3 phases of change. That's where change management comes in. I've done a lot of work around helping people look at challenging situations in their lives and figure out how to tackle it. So did I answer your question? I kind of started rambling, got excited.
Yeah, no. And I was asking you how you went from 100 to 57, and if 57 was a significant number.
Oh, yes. So that number came because I've always been, I'm not a in the box kind of person, but I like things to be kind of neat and tidy. And so 55 felt too tidy and 60 felt too tidy. And when I said to Phoebe, what do you think about the number 57? And she was like, well, that's an odd number. She literally was like, that's an odd number. I don't know. And I was like, well, it just feels right to me. Retrospectively, if you're into numerology and you look at 5 and 7 and you add them up, it's 12. And then you add those up, it's 3. And we made 3 decks. So
Yeah.
I didn't have a big idea about it, but I followed my intuition and I feel like it made sense for us. So 57. Yeah, I've seen people have said, why did she choose 57? It ends up resulting in an odd number of elements, but it's okay. Like,
Yeah. So
is
there's
all.
11 or 12 in each of the elements in all of the decks.
Yeah.
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 So my next, and I'm an intuitive and I do this kind of work all the time, but also I love the analytics of it all. And I'm just wondering, like, so in the process of the cut, did you cut because you had enough air or you had enough earth, or did you go scrambling because you couldn't find enough ether? And were there some that crossed certain elements and you couldn't decide whether to put them in water or ether and things like that? Like, how did that process go? Because I know in going through and going through and looking at the decks more carefully more recently, it's yes, it's intuitive, and yes, there's lots of different ways of thinking about it. So I'm just wondering what your process was.
That's interesting you asked that question, because it really wasn't a complex process aside from us. I mean, there are so many animals and so many flora. When I started doing the research on the Flora deck, because I've always been into nature and in touch with it and felt connected to it, but I've never studied botany. I don't know the language of flowers in terms of the scientific names. So when that particular deck came up, I had to choose between us, a number of people who are Oracle and deck users and creators. Should I create a deck that was an herb-based deck that then would be more herbal? And instead, for me, I ended up really moving more towards perennials and things that spoke to me and that were sort of more everyday for people. But there are some herbs that are intertwined in there. Phoebe, like I said, Phoebe and I would just create a list, and there's so many to choose from.
So many. Like I have some random questions, like, why do we have turtle and sea turtle?
Because for me, they really speak about very different aspects of self. Like, I was like, I have two turtles, but turtles are like land focus and so solid and grounding to me, whereas sea turtle is all about like just riding the waves and being immersed in it and like letting, like it just felt necessary for me. And the way Phoebe drew the sea turtle, I don't give her direction in terms of how she's going to draw or how she needs to depict each of the animals. She depicted this one walking on land, despite the fact that when I visualize a sea turtle, I visualize it in the water for me, right? Because I placed that one in water. But if I look at that card and I look at the image, it's about getting prepared to do the journey because no matter where you are, you're always going to be in it. So I just love the way her work and my work, there's just so many layers to be able to explore who you are as a human through these cards.
I want to ask you if you know the children's book, Grandfather Turtle.
I think I've heard of it, but I'm going to have to look to see.
Okay. It's an amazing one. And it's a really good children's book for talking about death with children. And you place turtle in spirit and ether. So that really fits well with me. So as an example, so like dragonfly, here's another one. So dragonfly could just as easily, Rebecca placed a dragonfly with fire, which I think is really cool because that connects to the dragon historical, ethos, the energy of the what do I want to, like, I feel like the essence of the dragonfly, but the dragonfly is also an airborne species, and lives in the water as well too, and is birthed in the water, I believe. So how did you choose? Like I just want to kind of pick at your brain a little bit, and just, I'm not going to do this for many cards, but like, why fire, not air or water? Yeah, air, fire, water.
Some of it. So I have a list. I keep going the wrong way. Here's my list of all the decks and what element they sit within. And this is going to end up being in a book. I'm writing a book called Within or Finding Essentia. I haven't come to a decision about which one the title is going to be, but this one the book further explains why it is I chose each of them. And the book is broken out into the 5 elements. And ether, which I call hearth, which is really starting from spirit, from self, from where you are, is about acceptance. And so the way that these animals, the flowers and the fantastics, were chosen were based also on how the metaphor of change is going to occur for people. So in the book, now that I have the 3 decks finished, my primary focus is working on the book so that I then can explain how one can manifest change, which is Fauna is about coming to awareness. The Flora deck is about digging in and doing your work. So, oh yeah, I realize I have these issues with this particular thing, these triggers. I should probably do some work around it. So the Flora deck I really wrote to be like, I really consciously need to work on these particular issues and see what tools, skills, and knowledge I can bring to the table. And then the Fantastic deck is about manifestation, about igniting. So I use the elements to help me. I'm creating that base for that conversation. And for me, the words, I think I printed it out.
The keywords.
Yeah, the keywords. Here's an example. In the book, God, I can't go backwards, or over here. You'll be it'll make more sense as to why I place particular animals in their specific elemental realm. But it's really because that keyword speaks to that element, not necessarily. And here's also the other piece. Remember, I was talking about how we all wear different hats. I really also believe the elements, our animals, the way I understand it through my intuitive work, when I'm trying to speak with somebody's animal spirit or entity, they might have popped in at that moment, but they're not always with them. And we're all of it. So for me, the hearth, which is a combination of all the elements, really speaks to the wholeness of us. And so dragonfly might be sitting right now in that deck as a fire element, but it can, like you said, sit in air. It could also sit in water. It just depends on what aspect of self it's choosing to activate in that particular moment, and how they need to source that energy to overcome that particular obstacle that is in their life. And so when I found people have placed themselves in a box or a silo and limited themselves to seeing outside of that because they've defined themselves by a particular archetype or a particular expectation or role, that's when they become stuck and when they can't move forward and through and see other alternatives. So a lot of, I struggled. That's why I also in this original deck had 3, I moved to 1. But in reality, I wish really people would just get more comfortable with sourcing their own intuition. I can't tell you what you should do with your life, or I can be there to help support you and coach you and ask some hard questions. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like, you know yourself better than I do. And so the decks, the elements, all of it. I watched your video when you were talking about the fantastics. And I love that you said there's so many layers to the metaphors. It's really being open to it and utilizing these prompts. They're really just prompts for you to think about. What does
Exactly. And
that
I
mean?
think, yeah, when you're working with cards, it's really important to trust what you feel. And if you need to pull water from the dragonfly, then you pull water. And
Mm-hmm.
you don't feel that you're wrong in any way because you're not associating it with fire. And then on another day, in another reading, you might need that fire from the
Mm-hmm.
dragonfly to help balance all that emotion or that, that heavy water energy that's hanging around. So it's really important, I think, to be fluid with that. And it's beautiful to know that you feel the same way. So can I ask some really practical questions?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I love is this paper. So this paper for the 3 decks that come in the boxes it reminds me of washi, Japanese paper. It's very natural. It really fits with the energy of the decks well. Like it matches the frequency of the decks, to use more of a esoteric lingo. So how did you choose this paper stock?
So if I could, I would share my screen with you so you could see, but I'm pulling some stuff out. So Phoebe.
I want to say hi to Kyle. Thanks for hanging out with us, Kyle.
So Phoebe draws these, and this is she lives in Maine. Phoebe lives in Maine. So she draws these on, we're using pen and ink on typical paper, drawing paper. And then she scans them in and she emails each of the images to me. So they end up becoming a digital file and she holds on to the original file. And then separately, I go and I paint. And I paint what I call big blobs of color. I paint all these colors and I don't necessarily know what it is that I'm going to do with them, but I know I'm going to end up scanning them in. So these are all on watercolor paper. And one of the things I felt like was really important when I created these decks was that you would get the same experience that I get when I'm holding my watercolor and painting. So the paper I picked is called felt paper, F-E-L-T. It's a specific kind of paper. In fact, I order more of it so that I can paint on the exact same paper that the decks are on. It's
Right.
not true watercolor paper, but you can do watercolor on it.
Yeah, it's more textured, right?
Yeah,
It's a
just
little
slightly more textured.
Yeah.
So that's, I'm giving you my experience of holding the decks. I also wanted them to be, I didn't really want them to be glossy or slick like a traditional deck. I really wanted them to feel earthy and grounded. And when you held them, they're kind of luscious and
They're super lovely. I love the way they sound when you bat. Like, I don't know if it makes you cringe that I riffle shuffle these cards, but
no.
I love the sound that they make. Like this sound.
Yeah, that's what I do.
There's no other paper that makes that sound. And I'm really about the tactile experience of the cards as well too. And that is something that's really unique about this deck. It's the paper. Like, I don't have any other decks that have this kind of paper. Do you?
I don't know. I've not seen any other decks. Usually they're that like slick paper, Rider Tarot deck paper. And I like them, like you can rub them against your face. And I don't know, I just love holding them in my hand. They make me want to go to it. And that's why I picked it.
Yeah, and I love, so I'm just going to take out this card right now. The Instagram post, there was one this week, and I'm sorry, I forget who it was. So thank you for your post. And this species is called axolotl.
Oh, yeah, Mystic Magic, I think it was.
Mystic Magic. And she said, I hope you're going to axolotl questions. And it was so, I just loved it. I really, really loved it. And the other thing about the Fantastic Being deck, and I've done videos on all 3 of these decks. If you want to go back and look at all of the cards, I suggest you go and do that, because we're not going to really go through the cards today. We don't have time. Is that we get a little tiny perspective, like a piece of each of the beings, the Fantastics, and it's so good for imagination and to work with intuition, because you're just looking at I told that story of the Pegasus, because I cracked this deck open lying in bed. I'm going like, what the heck is that? I didn't want to turn the card over, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me until I saw it in full light. Oh, okay, I get it. But it's really it's beautiful, the cards that do that. So, and then I told my tardigrade story, because like I laughed myself silly when I saw the tardigrade card. So yeah, pretty funny.
Those are fun to choose. That was probably the easiest one for Phoebe and I to move through. Actually, I had a bunch of a full other list that were more religion. I don't know how to describe it. And Phoebe was like, I don't know if I feel like we really should be doing those cards. They don't feel like our story, and something that we could really.
For example. Like a deity, you mean?
No, we had that, and we kept the Moai, and we kept the Sphinx. I think there were more. We did Fata Morgana. That was really important to me. The Green Man. Just things that I can't think of what they were at this moment, but that just didn't feel like stories that were ours to tell or to riff off of. So we ended up putting those aside and coming back to the list. And I almost cried when you just talked about the Fantastic deck, the imagination piece of it. If you know, like almost all the cards, I mean, there's some of the cards that you can see all of the animal. Mm-hmm. A portion of them, but when we came to the Fantastic deck, we really didn't want all of them to be something that you could immediately tell what it was, because we really do want to encourage in manifestation. It's about using your own intuition and igniting yourself and feeling confident and true about your own particular purpose. So that deck is for you, really, to sky's the limit.
Yeah, no, truly is. And I love, I mean, this is one where the pun is it's not really a pun, right? Because we can work with, the witch Morgana, or, with the whole concept of what is Fata Morgana, the illusion, or the tricks that our mind and our 3-dimensional eyes play with us. So I absolutely love this card. And I wanted to ask you, was there any connection with COVID in choosing this card?
No, that one was picked long before COVID even happened. So I just knew that we wanted that one. That one's interesting. I always thought Phoebe would do that one rolled up like a roly-poly. So when I got that one, when I got that one like that, I was like, I love her interpretation. It's been fun to work with her art.
So how did you two connect? Did you go to school in Maine together, or?
I was doing some business consulting with a company back in Maine, and she was an employee there. We worked together during a pretty intense time when they were going through some significant financial struggles and change. And I just felt like we could really connect on multiple levels while we were doing professional work for a business that had a lot of responsibility. We also kind of connected on the same spiritual level, and she uses art as an outlet, and I loved how she created art, and she's just so gifted and quick. I have something I have to show you. So after Phoebe and I kind of went through this process and we were no longer working with the company, we stayed in touch. And I said to her, hey, I stopped selling the old deck. I'd really like to resurrect a new deck or iterate and create a new one. What do you think about being my collaborator? It's kind of like asking her to get married to me, because I told her there's going to be 3 decks. So we're going to be doing a lot of art together. And around that same time, I had a young woman contact me whose son had passed away. And she asked me if, based on my old deck of cards, if I would create a memorial card for her son, Liam. And also another woman had contacted me and asked me to create a memorial card for her child as well, for her son. And so these were the first 2 cards. This is, the lion is actually an iteration. This was before, this is when we are starting to play with some new concepts. This is what I created for Liam. And this card was passed out at his memorial service.
Oh, wow.
He, 2 years old.
2 years
And
old.
then,
Wow.
yep, 2 years old. And then this little kid, Joseph, was 6 days old. And so these cards really, as I said to you before, they are really powerful in terms of the spirit energy they carry with them. They're really wrapped with human angst and emotion and magic, illumination.
So much love in the lion's eyes. Yeah.
I asked Phoebe to draw this, and she took about 5 minutes to draw it.
Phoebe?
Yeah, Phoebe.
Wow.
So I was like, yeah, she's the one.
Pretty incredible. Okay, so how did the junior decks come about?
Those are, because I started out as a pediatric nurse and I was working with children primarily. Then towards the end of my career, I was working with older adults in their 70s and 80s. A lot of the decks that I initially made were purchased by an adult for a child, but they also are kind of heady and a little deep. When you read the back of it, I don't write in I use big words and the sentences are long, so they're not super easy for children to read. But children go through just as much as adults do. They might not have as much context for some of the issues that they're dealing with, but they certainly need support. This is a really tough time in our world, and I wanted to offer a way for parents or whoever is raising a child to be able to have some deeper conversations about what's happening in their life. Chickadee is a word that when my son was about 6 or 7, was he that? Maybe he was 8. We had a conversation. He picked the chickadee card, and I had to read it to him and explain to him what does tenacity mean. And he sat with it for a couple days, and then he came back and he had an experience on the playground, and he says to me, "Mom, you'd be really proud of me. I was really tenacious out there today." And so after we had that conversation, I realized kids need a way to connect with nature and spirit. They're more connected than we are as adults, but a way to have some of those conversations. And they're more wise in a lot of ways. They don't really have filter. So when you start to have these conversations with them, it's much easier for them to just get into it, especially when you're sitting in a hospital room with them. They just go right for it.
For sure. And so you changed. Well, I'm sure there's 2 things. One is the keyword is different on several of the junior cards, and to make the language accessible for children, but also space, practical reasons.
Yes.
Some of the keywords were quite long, and you have a limited number of space if you were to keep the font exactly the same size. So, yeah. So on the back of and you can see this on my videos, on the back of the junior decks is the card back. there's not a long inspirational message. So they're just really beautiful. And you changed the paper too.
Yeah, the feedback I got from parents when I was selling the other deck, especially for kids, is that they needed something more durable, that kids could pick up and bend and that wouldn't immediately get ripped. That being said, so many of the kids that I would sell these decks to when they would come to a fair, they somehow would touch it and immediately know they needed to slow themselves down. Parents would freak out and be like, "Oh, touch that." And I would say, that's fine. Like, you go have ahead. I would pick up the deck and I would hand them to them. Boys and girls, 6 to 10, even younger, would pick them up and somehow know that they needed to be more gentle and tender with them. So I feel like the next iteration of junior decks there'll be something different to them. I'd like to change those.
In what way?
Probably the paper. I like the size of them, but I also think there needs to be a book or message that goes along with it. So parents who are not in, yeah,
something on the back.
maybe, or a little book that goes along with it to prompt parents on how to utilize this tool, because I don't think that they know how to have these deeper conversations. Most adults, when I try to have deeper conversations, I really have to frame it and create a sacred sort of space with them. And it's hard for adults who don't know how to do it with themselves to then hold that space for a child and have that kind of a deep conversation if they haven't been trained on how to do that. So I think I need a tool book of some sort to be able to help people who are working with children to know how to create that space.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that remote. Yeah.
And will that be part of the book, or that's a separate book?
Probably a separate book.
Separate book. Okay.
Yeah.
And did this come in an earlier iteration with just the 2 decks, or did this little pamphlet always have the 3 decks in it?
That was a new pamphlet that I started adding as soon as Phoebe and I were near to the end of creating the Fantastic deck. So I knew Fantastics was coming out, and I knew it was about to be. So I created that. I also started getting more requests from people on how to use the deck. People were like, "This is a deck I've never seen before." I would get text messages and emails and messages on Etsy and off my website, like, "How do I use this deck? This is so different than most Oracle decks. I don't," and so I created that to help people and also to frame it. Like I said, I'm a social worker and a nurse. Maybe my approach to these Oracle decks is a little different.
Yeah, well, in this pamphlet, it's quite clear your intention of the 3 stages of working with the decks or using them for different needs and purposes. And so it's brief, but it's here and it's clear. Yeah. And then, so why the mini decks?
That's a fun story. A woman that I was working with who creates jewelry, she wanted to be able to put cards in her boxes, specific ones. They're all nature-inspired pieces of jewelry that are made out of driftwood and other elements. And she had contacted me and said, "Hey, could we do a collaboration together where I could include one of your cards, like the lion or the sea turtle, and put them in my jewelry box as part of the package?" And I was like, "Absolutely, that would be so fun." And so I asked her, "What size is your jewelry box?" Because my decks are too big to probably fit in an earring or box. And so she gave me the dimensions, and I made a bunch of cards for her. And when I picked up the deck, well, the stack of cards, my son Jono was in the car with me, and he said, "Mom, these are so cool and so cute. You need to make a deck out of these." And so I created the mini deck. I also fell in love with the little white border and the size of them, and they're just so easy to tuck into your purse or your bag and travel with them. Plus, the price point is a little bit different. It's less expensive. So people who don't want to invest $35 in the book or the box deck and really want to travel with them, this is a better size.
Yeah, I just put one of them in this little, I don't know where this pouch came from, but they fit perfectly in here.
Yeah.
I'm traveling with the Fantastics. Yeah. So yeah, because the box costs big money.
That is an expensive box. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very
I
pretty
am
box.
getting a little box made for the mini deck. So it will come probably in the next 6 months, maybe sooner, in a little tuck box.
Mm-hmm.
So the actual deck, because I have had a lot of feedback from customers about they like that it's shrink wrapped, but they'd like to have a little case. So it actually fits. The whole thing will fit right in the box.
Mm-hmm.
I still have to design it, as you can see.
You still have to design it?
Yeah, it's just a white box, but it will have the design just like the other boxes.
And
so that's
does that one you have rounded corners? Because these ones have square corners.
No, they all have square corners. That's
Okay.
to keep the price of this down.
Right.
I run everything in really small quantities so that I can keep the price at a reasonable price, but it also means that my price per unit is high. So I don't want to have excess.
Yeah. No, I get that. And then I think $20 is the perfect price point for the kids deck. But if you have to, well, I guess if you change the back, you're still printing. This is still a double-sided printed card. So it's not going to change the cost if you change the card backs.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I understand the need to have more information. Like for me, I get it, but for a lot of parents and I can see these being really useful tools for child psychologists and things like that, just to have around. I know a lot of child psychologists work with like three-dimensional objects. I used to take one of my daughters and there was this extraordinary, I don't know how many shelves just full of creatures, beings from all dimensions and all sizes and all media, from crystal to plastic to, rubber and clay and so forth. And I could really see this kind of deck being used in that field as well too, not just with parents or parents with children in hospital, but, and then as I mentioned, with teachers working with children who are struggling with one thing or another. I feel like these decks have so much potential. And a revised back might be helpful for a lot of people too, for sure.
Yeah. The maybe you could brainstorm with me. One of the things while I was doing my intuitive training, it was a year-long training. I learned that the animals and the flowers speak to me in language that I understand. It's kind of like, okay, I speak English, so animals speak to me. That is really literal for me, but isn't necessarily literal for you, meaning it's up to you to then interpret what that may have meant. Like I can share a piece of, for example, a particular smell comes in fairly frequent for me, like oranges. And I will, when I was newer to my intuitive training, I would say, what is orange? Like, why are you telling me orange? I would say why are you making me smell oranges right now? And then they would be like, well, because you need to smell oranges. And I would say, oh, because to me, oranges are fresh and growth, or what it was. Like I needed to just listen to the message and understand that's what it means. So then, right, like it's a symbol. And I have to interpret how they're like, Rebecca, you always think of oranges as fresh. You're like, oh, that tastes so fresh. And so it's literal to me, but then the message that I have to convey to the person I'm reading to, I have to understand within the context of their situation. What is it that I need to be sharing with them about? It's not orange. I'm not saying you need to go buy a bunch of oranges. You might need to open the door and allow something new and fresh in your life, or that's the message that's there. My point to this is, unless you use the cards frequently enough, which you can access source anytime, but it's really a matter of you getting to know yourself, and the messages and the language and what your triggers are, and how for you to work through them. So I didn't create a guidebook for that reason, because I didn't want people to think that I was this huge source of wisdom and knowledge and the only person who could tell them how to use deck, but really for them to start intuiting that for themselves. So I guess my question is, like, how do you feel as a practitioner who works with people? Do you feel that way too? Because I struggle sometimes with readings in that way.
Well, I mean, one of my I'll never forget when I first did public Lenormand readings, and Lenormand is quite literal. And the person, and I find also too, if you're working and the person they can actually see the cards, or they're actually with you in the room, it's really important to give that person an opportunity to go, I know what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Because they might pick up on a symbol. Like you might be hearing orange, but I bet somewhere in there's a splash of orange watercolor or something that they're going to connect with, or something that makes them feel fresh. Maybe they will see some greens, and at the same time that you're smelling oranges, they're thinking, whoa, the air in this room feels really fresh. Like I think there's these synchronicities that happen. And so if we are doing distance readings, we lose that. But I think if you're working with people, and the more you practice it, you just need to allow it to come through and not get stuck on book meanings. But in the beginning, the books are really helpful, and we need to, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with leaning on your books and relying on your books and your guidebooks and your little white books and your resources and so forth. But eventually, anybody who's picking up these cards has the ability, has the skills to work without them. It's just a matter of trusting yourself and trusting that internal connection to source. And we all experience that differently. Yeah, I don't even know if I answered your question, but
yeah, you did.
Yeah. So I need to wind this up shortly. I have unexpected things going on here, but the last thing I want to ask you is about collective wisdom. I was blown away, and thank you for this sample copy, by the way.
You're welcome.
I will definitely subscribe, and I will definitely send you a couple of ideas for contributions. I would love to be a part of this in the future. Again, an extraordinary production, paper quality, binding, a variety of topics and so forth. So you've got 2 issues out now?
Yeah, we just, so you've got the inaugural first issue, and then, oops. Sorry, this is my office / studio, so you get to, this is the second issue, Flourish, that came out in July and August. And then this one is the latest issue. I just shipped last week. This is the September-October issue. This was a COVID creation for sure. I did a series on Instagram of 14 days of contemplative writing prompts. I really love contemplative writing. I love using metaphor. And I did those 14 days, and as a social worker, I tend to broker anyways. I always know there's so much wisdom that's out there in this world. I don't have all of it. There's no way. And as an educator, I've always told my nursing students and the people that I've worked with, Danielle, that if you don't know it, someone else knows it. So don't be afraid of saying you don't know. Just start asking the questions. So after COVID happened, there was a social worker who had posted something with one of my cards, the Flora deck, I believe. She wrote in there, her name's Amy Laginus. She's in California, and she, on her name, calls herself an ecotherapist, or as part of her title. And all these years of working in the healthcare and mental health world, I'd never heard anybody coin themselves as an ecotherapist before. So I immediately, I reached out to her and was like, Amy, you don't know me, but you have my deck of cards. Can you tell me more about what is ecotherapy? She put me in touch with a couple other people, and before you knew it, I was like, hey, what do you think about putting together a magazine? I thought maybe in that first issue, I would have maybe 6 people who would be interested in contributing. I had over
two pages.
Yeah.
You had how many?
Over 20 people who contributed to that first issue.
Yeah.
And it's really about mental health, whole health, wellness, and that how can you take care of your mind, body, and soul, and then also exposure to all the paths that exist. That there's not just one path. Having been and worked in the healthcare world for so long, our treatment modalities we have a lot, but it's also a very limited realm. And yet I found so many people find healing through other modalities, that this is a way to encourage people to kind of get exposure to things they may not have otherwise heard of. And yet there's also some scientific stuff in there. There's some things about the wheel of
the year.
Yeah.
It's like a little it's like a sampling of so many different topics. And like the decks, it's also a tactile experience. And the photographs did you choose all the photographs, or did they submit their own photographs, or how did that happen?
So the process is I just contact individuals. We usually meet and Zoom and have a conversation about their background and history and what they're passionate about. And then I kind of leave it open to them to write. All the photography is either submitted by the contributors themselves, or I have a couple of photographers that have also contributed. It's all free. Everybody does everything for free because this is coming out of my pocket 100%. I have a very small subscribership. I mean, we're on our 3rd magazine, but I do all the layout. So everybody sends me their work and their submissions, and then I create the entire magazine using a design software program called InDesign, and manage the whole printing and publishing aspect of it. So if there's mistakes in it, it's my fault, not theirs.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. I found one mistake somewhere, and I can't remember where it was. I'll let you know if I ever see it again. Anyway, it's just perfect. And I'm so happy that you were able to join me today. And my intention for doing this is that I really want people to experience this work, because it is, like I was saying, like there's something different about these cards, and it's not just another indie deck. It has to do with the emotion, the story behind it, all of Rebecca's experiences, the collaboration with Phoebe Hunt. Yeah, there's just so much love and care, and I want more people to know about your work. And this was a extra bonus, and yeah. So thank you so much. Is there anything that I haven't asked you today that you want people to know about?
Um, oh, that's a good question. I was thinking of, I just feel so grateful to be able to put this out into the world and share it. It's part of why the magazine is called Collective Wisdom. It's not just me proselytizing, but it's these experiences that have been given to me from so many humans who have endured so much pain, because we don't reach out and ask for help. And I just don't want to see it anymore. And the world is in such a place of hurt right now. It hurts to see. And so these are just a small sampling of tools. And I just want people to know they have more options than what they might perceive that sit in front of them. Otherwise, thank you so much for having me on to talk about my work. I feel really grateful that you reached out to me and asked me to be your first person to do your creator stories. And I look
Yeah.
forward to working with you in the future.
Yes, I really do. And I'll start to think about, yeah, how I could contribute to this. And I'll pick up the other two copies and kind of see where nobody's written about so far either. So yeah. So thank you. Thank you again.
Yeah.
Again, Rebecca's website is aveclavie.com. And I will be back in just under 2 weeks with Creator Stories #2. And my second guest will be Akal Pritam, who is creator of the Self-Love Oracle, as well as the mini Oracle deck, Let Go and Inspired by Frida. So yeah, so I will see you in about, just under 2 weeks. It won't be on a Sunday, but I'll put the link up as soon as possible. So thank you. Thanks to everybody for being here. Stay well and namaste.
Thank you.